Hi everyone, Sid here, finally back for another shaving rant. I've let myself go over the last couple weeks, but I'm back, and today I'm coming back to the Conversation Hacks series, which I haven't added anything to in a while. But first, today's lather will be Pro Razzo Blue, to which I will be adding lavender, tea tree oil, and eucalyptus, and the aftershave will be white musk from the Body Shop. So, today's topic, I would like to share with you something that is very useful. It's an important tool in today's society because sadly the topic that I'm going to address in this video, it kind of permeates society. I think that it's something that's far too common. I think I'll make a case for it throughout this video, and I think that when you think about it, it unfortunately permeates a lot of our childhoods. Basically, I want to share this with you. It's, despite what I'm about to talk about in this video, I do it every now and then, which is why it's all that important to talk about it. I've beaten around the bush enough. I'm talking about passive aggression, and I think that the first step to basically dealing with passive aggression and identifying passive aggression are kind of the same thing. I want to give a clear definition of passive aggression, or at least what I mean by it, and I think it's a pretty good one. I picked it up over the years of watching Free Domain Radio, and I think that with the examples I'm going to give, my comment on how I think that identifying passive aggression and dealing with it are kind of the same thing. So, the definition, the basic definition of passive aggression that I use is when you say or do something that is likely to elicit an emotional response or an emotional reaction within the person that you're talking to, and then you reject that response. So it's really simple, and the two examples that I came up with that I'm going to use in this video are pretty typical examples. I think that with the definition I just gave in the two examples, it's going to be pretty clear what I am talking about. So we will get to that right after I've lathered up my mouth. Alright, so example number one is, let's say two people are talking about whatever, and to make this even more blatant, let's make one of these people overweight, like a fat person. And so these two people are talking, let's make them both men, and eventually the fat dude, he says, is there any place we can get something to eat? I'm hungry. And the other person says, yeah, I'm sure you are. That would be an example of passive aggression because, well, actually, it's not necessarily. I'll get to that in a second. But let's just make it passive aggression for this example. So the fat dude says, "Hey, that wasn't cool. What do you mean about that? Or what do you mean by that? Or what are you trying to say?" Or if he's more perceptive, he'll go straight into the "that's not cool. That was a pretty hurtful thing to say." Yada yada. And then the passive-aggressive dick would be would typically say something along the lines of, "Oh, you can't take a joke. I'm only kidding." You know, that kind of thing. So basically, this is an example of. I mean, it's pretty obvious when you think about it that. When a fat person says, "I'm hungry," and you say, "Yeah, I bet you are," that's going to provoke an emotional response of hurt within that person, and to subsequently reject that hurt is what makes this passive aggression. So the other example, which is also far too stereotypical in our society, let's take a romantic couple, so a boyfriend and a girlfriend, and they want to pick what to do for that evening or whatever, what their date is going to be. So let's say that the guy wants to go to the movies and the girl wants to go to the restaurant, and for whatever reason it's not possible to do both. I'm tempted to mention the existence of my my video on compromise versus negotiation. I think that's what that was what the topic of that video was. So the couple are bickering back and forth, and yeah, the guy wants to go to the movies. I forget who wanted to do what, but the guy wants to go to the movies and the girl wants to go to the restaurants, and they bicker back and forth and they present their arguments, and eventually the woman says, fine, let's just go to the movies, whatever. I'll be right back. So a typical response from the guy in this situation would be to not really be sure what to say, and say something along the lines of, you don't have to be like that, we can, we can figure something out for the restaurant or whatever, and the woman would go, no, it's okay, we're going to the movies, it's settled. That would be a slightly more subtle example of passive aggression, because when you're discussing which options to take, and for whatever reason they're mutually exclusive, to suddenly burst out, okay, fine, we'll pick option B, it's pretty obvious that when someone does that, it puts you in a state of unease, and to subsequently reject the feelings of uneasiness is what makes this passive aggression. Which leads me to the elaboration on my comment on how detecting and dealing with passive aggression are kind of one and the same, because the solution really, when you're in that kind of situation, is to just point it out. Step one would be to openly and honestly share what you're feeling, which is easier said than done. Well, depending on the situation, it can be. But that's the first step, so that's kind of the moment of truth moment, where either, let's say, the fat dude says, I'm hungry, and the other guy says, I'm sure you are, and the guy says, that was a pretty hurtful thing to say. If the guy is being passive aggressive, the response to that would be something along the lines of, you can't take a joke, I'm just kidding around, why are you always so serious, and that kind of stuff. Whereas if they're not, it was like, oh shit, I'm sorry, I don't know why I said that way, maybe I'm having a bad day myself, yada yada yada, and use that as a stepping grounds for further self-exploration. Because passive aggression, it's kind of like a specter that's kind of there. Like, the aggression is passive. The term says so itself. And to just, first of all, point out your feelings, and if the person rejects them, you can just break out, you're being passive aggressive, because it's kind of obvious that I would be hurt about that, and you're rejecting my hurt. And from there, that could be a tool. An example I like to use, which is kind of why I've self-interrupted a couple times, is let's say someone hits your parked car in front of you. The difference between a hit and run and an honest mistake is what happens right after that person hits your car. So if they stop and pull over and look for the owner and apologize and exchange information, then you know that it's an honest mistake. But if they just hit the gas and speed off, then you know that it's a hit and run. So the open sharing of your feelings combined with just pointing out the passive aggression if those feelings are rejected is what can help you distinguish whether it's even worth talking to this person, because you know, we all do it, and it's a rule of thumb that you can use, sadly, is whenever there's this uneasy feeling in a conversation that suddenly pops up, to ask the question, did passive aggression just happen? And all too often the answer is yes. And that's why sometimes the passive aggressive person is the other person. Sometimes it's you. That's why it's important to be able to identify it. Again, say something likely to elicit a response, and then you reject that response. In the heat of the moment, I can be a passive-aggressive dick as well. However, when I care about the relationship, to just explore why did I say that. Let's say that the other person isn't as versed in detecting and dealing with passive aggression. I could nip the nail in the bud and nip it in the bud. And let's say I was the guy talking to the fat dude, and and he didn't know, he had that uneasy feeling that he wasn't sure where it came from, that I could say, oh, I'm sorry I said that, I was being passive aggressive, I'm having a bad day, blah, blah, blah. So I just want to make sure that there's nothing else worth mentioning. No, and that's it. Again, it's so prevalent in our society, unfortunately, that it's very useful to just be able to detect it, because it's kind of like explaining water to fish. It's easy to lose sight of what it is and just have these uneasy feelings kind of be there mysteriously. So I can't really add much without rambling, so thank you very much for watching. You can please like and share. Leave comments under this video if there's anything you'd like to share or express, so that I can reject those feelings. And on Twitter, and you can find me on Twitter and Tumblr. The links to all that is right under this video. And please subscribe to me on YouTube. That would help me out a lot. So thank you very much. Like, share, subscribe, all that shit. I'll see you soon, and you take care. Later.